Welcome to Tailored Mindfulness Experience. I'm joined today by Cynthia Lunine. Cynthia lives in Ithaca, New York. She is a unified mindfulness coach. She comes from a Christian background. She enjoys diving into physical explorations of life and inquiry into human meaning and values. She also explores the visual arts and is very interested in developing practice in life techniques for a wide range of people. So, welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Bob.
So, Cynthia, let's kind of explore what your childhood is like and kind of what your journey in faith and spirituality. Are you okay sharing that?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, as I like to say. It was halfway between El Paso, Texas, and Tucson, Arizona, in a dusty desert small town. So geographically isolated, informationally isolated, pre-internet, as you might imagine, in the 1950s and 60s, because I'm pretty old. So We, I was a part of a family that was a fundamentalist Christian. Church of Christ was the name of the denomination.
Okay.
And so it was sola scriptura. It's like the Bible is the only book that you read, and this is the only group of people that are going to heaven. And that was my world for the longest time. As a child, I really didn't know anything else. So I was terrified of going to hell at the age of 6 and
Gosh.
demanded that I be baptized because I knew that would save me. So they agreed. And I lived in that world until basically halfway through high school. I started feeling a certain dissatisfaction and I started reading a little more. Science fiction was actually one of my big escape hatches to a bigger thought realm.
So,
And
what kind of science fiction books did you get into?
oh, I read everything I could get my hands on from the small local library, which is Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke,
Oh yeah.
um, um, what's his name, Bradbury, um, it, a lot of the sort of classical science fiction authors of the time. And so I saw that the world I lived in was very small, and so it opened the doors to the what if, which was appealing to me because even as a child, I was intensely curious about the world. We spent a lot of time out in nature. Families had a ranching background, raising Angora goats.
Okay.
So we were always prowling over the rocky hills and diving into canyons and fishing with my dad. And so that kind of thing gave me this very strong sense of relationship to nature, which I'm able to articulate that in a different way these days after mindfulness training, but it's still very powerful and prominent in my nervous system.
How big was your family? Did you have siblings or?
I'm an only,
Oh, wow. Okay.
only.
So was
Um,
there a
uh,
lot of pressure on you being in that religious background?
well, I was the only child in the church too
Oh,
for
okay.
this time. It was a very dry, kind of desiccated form of worship. So my parents would say, "Why don't you invite your friends to church?"
Okay.
And I was so shy, I didn't have many friends for one thing, but I thought to myself, this is the last place I want them to come because it's so boring. But it was an incredibly loving community. So there were a lot
Yeah.
of things that they got right
Yeah.
in the worship service, maybe not, but they did really welcome. Hospitality was huge. They would welcome in strangers and, all kinds of wonderful things I learned from that tradition. I learned to memorize scripture, and that is still one of the greatest treasures of my life
Yeah.
because it just comes to mind and it provides this wisdom value throughout the years. So, my perspective on spirituality has changed radically since then. I left the church utterly when I got into my 20s and just kind of threw it all out. But then that longing came back. there's got to be something more than this, because the other side of secularism was also very dry. Even though the arts were present, nature was present, but any kind of spiritual practice was missing. And I longed for something that was vivid and full of life, like I had read about and people had told me about their lives. It's like I didn't feel that. I didn't have that. I didn't have that background.
Yeah. Um, when you mentioned about the science fiction side of things, and it kind of opened your world. Was that a gradual shift, or was there something pivotal that made you start questioning things?
That's a very good question. Um, I think it would have been a gradual shift, but it was accompanied by my questions about spirituality not being answered satisfactorily by the people that I knew.
And what
Um,
kind of questions do you ask?
it's like, well, how do you know there's a God?
Yes, yeah.
That kind of question.
What did they say? What was the reply?
Well, it's a mystery. Or, why do we have to do this? Well,
Yeah,
because God said so, because the Bible says so.
yeah.
And it's like, well, where did all that come from? Yeah, there was just a long string of questions. I mean, I went to a Christian university, Abilene Christian University, and found some really wonderfully spiritual, deep people there. But it was still the very conservative, scripture only. And eventually, after I got out of that environment, it wasn't deeply satisfying. There were just too many rules. It was very rules based.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, when I look at Jesus of Nazareth, he was like rule breaker extraordinaire. That was just what he did. It's like, the rules are made for man, not man for the rules.
Yeah.
So I kind of resonated with a deeper reading, a deeper appreciation for what was going on, I think, in that early um, Jesus's life. And that's what has kind of stuck with me as a model for how to engage with reality. And he was definitely a mystic. So there's just no question about that. He used to get really frustrated because his disciples couldn't hang with an all-night sit. In the Mount of Olives, he was like, how come you just go to sleep? You're praying and you're going to sleep.
Yeah. And did you continue, I mean, your journey with Christianity? Was there a particular um, sect or branch of Christianity that you felt home in? Or was it your own evolvement into where you are now?
Well, after a period of time, I discovered a group. It happened to be a United Methodist Church, but it wasn't the United Methodist Church that drew me there. It was the leader, David Wilkinson was his name, and he was a big fan. He considered Teilhard de Chardin as one of his mentors. De Chardin was a Catholic priest, a scientist, but also a mystic. And so I think I started seeing that mystical type of presence in a lot of what was going on in this particular group, even though it was not so overt. And finally, I was eventually led to Shinzen, but that was through a couple of friends who were meditators and friends of his, Bink Selby and Linda Fong. And he told me the story of his, it was basically a Kensho or sudden enlightenment experience. And he said, I was a type A asshole. And if I can,
You
but,
can say that, yes.
but that's how he described himself. He was
Yeah,
an inventor, a mover, shaker, businessman, could care less about just about anybody around him. On a river rafting trip, he experienced this. So he was immersed in nature. He was totally stressed out. His businesses were failing, and suddenly this explosion of release. And it went on for days and days and days. And he heard a radio broadcast of Shinzen. And he said he started talking about what I had gone through.
Wow.
He said, I've got to get a hold of this, call him up. And that was the beginning of his story. And
And what
so,
was your introduction? Yeah, what was your introduction into Shinzen like?
well, he handed me the cassette tapes
Oh yeah,
of the Signs of Enlightenment.
yeah,
And I'd sit in my hallway and with the headphones on and my back against the wall, and I just listened hour after hour of those. And I think I was actually getting an altered state of consciousness via his voice. But what the content was also interesting, as you know. And I was really kind of hooked. So was near the end of the year, and I was able to jump into his end of year 10-day silent meditation retreat without ever having meditated before.
yeah.
That was my
Wow.
introduction to meditation. And it was phenomenal. But it was also a rocky road after that because there wasn't any support group really at that
Yeah,
time. You know, you would go there. I didn't know anybody. You would suddenly go silent, and then you have a plane to catch at the end of it. And so there's no community and there's no support after the retreat. And so my practice would just die off pretty quickly. And then in a year, I'd go to another retreat and I get all excited again. So I knew that something was there, but it was a little rocky. You know, it's like my sensory clarity developed long before my equanimity did.
yeah,
So I became pretty reactive after retreats, and I didn't know how to manage that. So that's one of the things that interests me today is in, you know, supporting people as a coach. I think that's a wonderful development in the system is having coaches and support groups and community groups like what Juliana's put together.
yeah.
So yeah.
Were there any pivotal experiences in your mindfulness journey?
Well, those early retreats, I can't remember what happened exactly when, but yeah, I had this synesthesia experience where sound and visual material were kind of merging in the same. I had these big, you know, altered states of consciousness at one point that kind of went on sort of this big opening. Sometimes it was difficult material that might come up, but then it was this purification process that allowed it to go forward. So I think what really happened is that the promise was fulfilled, which is a, a much more vivid um, version of reality presented itself. I don't think I've been bored since my first meditation retreat. Yeah, I never get bored anymore.
Yeah,
Um, the, you know, the things that I had read about started happening within me. And I hadn't really believed that that was possible for that to occur. The other thing was I had low level depression for a few years before that. And everything was good in my life. A beautiful young son, you know, my husband had a good job. We didn't have money trouble. I was able to pursue a lot of the things I wanted to do, but sort of flat. I was on Zoloft for a while, and it's like, what's wrong with this picture? And so it was that was when I entered the first retreat,
hmm,
and I didn't need that anymore. In my case, you know, I know that some people really do need medications, but
yeah.
for me, that was just kind of, you know, it was an opening.
So through that retreat, something shifted.
Something shifted.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, pretty dramatically.
Wow.
Yeah, 10 days is a really good start. It's a good way to start.
There was a question I had, but it's not coming to me. Maybe it'll come back. You mentioned about nature being important. Have you always felt that? You mentioned about, with your parents, So, was there an that undercurrent of being in nature in always part of your life?
Yes, that has always been important. Going out in the Rocky Hills, exploring with my nose to the ground, picking up rocks, but also the sound of water, crawling through caves, the rocky canyons of the West, um, being out there in the silence. There's something about desert silence. I think that, I now know as appeal to mystics throughout the ages, but the silence and the vastness of space, the vividness of the sky in the desert Southwest
Hmm.
is really powerfully powerful and profound. It was really great. I had a wonderful relationship with my father, so he and I shared. We were on the same page when we were out in nature like that. So we could be quiet together and be surrounded by all of this. So I was into the plants and the mosses and the trees and the flowers, interested in everything, but feeling very connected when I would be in those places.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's speaking out to me because I love being in nature, and as you were describing, it's that connection with that bigger part, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's being like fully, it's like being home for me is, some people are fearful out in the woods or whatever, but I just long to be out where I may not know where I am. I love being lost in the woods or lost in the canyons or, I feel I was given skills so that I would always kind of know how to find my way.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to train children how to connect with nature in a
So
really productive.
how were you taught these skills? What happened? Was it your dad or
Yeah, it was mostly my dad. My
okay?
mom was afraid of everything.
Yeah. So how did he teach you? Was some of the things he did or um, about not being lost, etc.
Let's go fishing,
Okay.
and we would go up. I mean, you can't get lost when there's a river.
Okay.
The or let's go out. Like he would come home from work, in the summer when there's lots of hours left in lots of daylight. Well, let's go out to the ranch for a hike. And the three of us usually would pile in a car and we go out and we find some rocky canyon and, we come across a rattlesnake or a Gila monster. And that was just so cool. And, um, or we would occasionally find pottery shards. So we'd be poking around in the dirt and looking at the sides of the uh, eroded canyon walls for are there fossils or is there any interesting, beautiful rocks coming out of the sides, weathering out of the sides.
Yeah.
We had favorite places. Oh, let's go climb Pyramid. That's a peak, a local peak that would be, pretty tough off-trail day hike over rocks. And you get up and you have a beautiful 360 view of the desert that just goes on forever. This is southern New Mexico, so it's an amazing place. Pastel palette. This is the Georgia O'Keeffe palette of colors, although she was further in the north. But if you know her as an artist,
No.
she
Um,
spent a lot.
but it sounds like your dad, fostered that adventure and curiosity,
Yes.
would you say? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He grew up herding goats
Yes.
and, he was a working ranch hand. And yeah, but he had an appreciation. He used to love to take photographs of forests and streams and beautiful places. So yeah, that's where that really came from, companions and in that journey. And that's definitely a lifelong love. So it's appreciation. I think it's something that I try to bring out for clients when I coach is trying to find some natural process, running water,
Hmm.
um, leaves that flow in the air, trees that flow in the air, the sound of wind coming through aspen trees or birch trees, and connecting with sitting on a warm rock in the sun, just being with all of that
Yeah,
and merging with it. So, yeah, I think those flow patterns in nature are really, really helpful for practitioners to kind of resonate, get get connected, you know, become one with all that is.
yeah. Tapping into that.
Yeah,
Um,
not too trite or trivial about. Yeah,
and when did you the artist, the art part and handcrafts come into your life? Was it always there, or did it gradually come?
I think that was always there. Uh, Not so much drawing, but I like to, make little scenes out in the dirt, little farms with toys and trucks and animals and things, and then creating later, taking some art classes in high school and doing some drawing and experimenting with a few media. And then I got a bachelor's degree in art and eventually went back to school as an adult and got a master's in landscape architecture. So that kind of created that nature. Although I didn't practice because I didn't become a professional. I'm kind of glad I didn't. A lot of people end up, making parking lots for strip malls and, and little urban parks where budget is driving everything. And it's very hard to do a lot of original things. So I think I was sort of lucky to escape that particular that particular trap. But I've been incredibly fortunate in my life that my husband, has a very good job, makes income, and it allows me to pursue some of the more esoteric things that I love.
Like what?
Um, well, like mindfulness, like going off to
Yes,
retreats for 10 days,
yes, yeah.
or like taking classes in um, mosaic art, um,
I
glass
know
mosaic.
that's a big passion of you, mosaic art.
Yeah, it is. And that's partly from travel to Italy and seeing some of the ancient pieces, the life and the vivid nature of them. So that reflects the inner life, the vivid nature of the inner life expressed in the outer life. And for me, I think it's mostly more three-dimensional, two-ish dimensional, three-dimensional kinds of work and exploration of color. So, yeah,
And what
that's
about the writing? Because I know you do some writing as well, don't you?
I do a little bit. That
Yeah,
I don't know where that came from. I read a lot.
yeah.
I've always read a lot. My husband is a scientist and we talk a lot, we converse a lot, and he reads a lot of interesting things and we pass things back and forth. So my reading level has been upped due to his academic excellence. And so when one reads at a sort of challenging level, I think it enables writing at a higher level than before. So I think reading some people like David Bentley Hart has helped me to write some of my essays, and they're not anything at all at his level, but it helps the words to flow. And practice also helps those doors to open so that there aren't as many blockades as I may have had in the past to that. So that seems to be a medium that flows around certain things. But I'm not trained in particular as a writer. You know, it's like I went through a liberal arts university education, and I don't know, I write emails a lot, but I'm long-winded and and I ended up writing essays about practice related topics, musing, observations of things I see and think about, read
I've
about.
I've got a question I'd like to ask you, Cynthia. Um, what is a mystic?
Depends on who you ask.
So I'm asking you, what is a mystic for you?
Well, a mystic is could be a number of things, but the thing that comes to my mind is someone who can live in the realm of paradox and be able to be willing to see things from many different views and that not be a problem. So I think it's someone who has open consciousness to deeper levels of possibility and is allowing for a different way of knowing, as Shinzen would put it, is that knowledge is really not residing so much in the thinking mind for a mystic as it is in the mind of spirit and deeper knowledge that includes the body mind, but it also includes our embeddedness into nature and reality. So, you know, this room that surrounds me is also a work of nature.
Mhm,
And we are also a part of nature, and the things we do are natural, just by definition. So trying to see these relationships, have both a broader and a deeper view of reality, I think that contributes to this perspective of mystery,
mhm.
paradox. Those are kind of two of the watchwords, I think, of mysticism.
Yeah.
But I think it can be different things for different people through the ages.
As you were describing it, it seems to me that there is that openness um, to experience.
Yes. You know, there Shenson talks about expansion and contraction, and we talk about spaciousness. We talk about the cloud of unknowing, perhaps a term from an ancient mystic, but the idea of being in a realm of non-concrete thinginess. You know, there's like getting out of the world of thinginess, which is having concrete definitions. You have words, you have concepts, you have shapes and forms, and those tend to coalesce around something that is quite rigid.
Mhm,
So deconstructing all of that in body and mind is, I think, the task that we're presented with, and that allows more degrees of freedom for our creativity, imagination, and fulfillment. So it just allows this flow of nature to bring out that natural goodness, the natural kindness, the natural compassion that we have. That is a spacious, more open. It's not just open-minded.
mhm,
Open-minded is still more about the thinking mind, right?
mhm.
Um, but this is like open everything.
Yeah.
But then there's that contractive element too. So we live in that realm too.
So that paradox of a foot in both worlds.
Yes, yes, simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, Now, is there any aspect of your work that you're doing that you like to share with other people, projects you're doing that are meaningful for you?
I'd like to just say that it's very important to me to do a lot of things, like create these visual forms like Mosaic, to pursue that uh, that crafting of the parts of the sort of the incarnate world, if you want to put it that, and then have that completely integral with the spiritual realm and the development of some of these skills, concentration, clarity, equanimity. But even more than that, the compassion part. So these all inform each other. The beauty of the natural world, the beauty of the created art, the arts, music. I also am an amateur musician, a little, piano and voice, but creating a beautiful sound and a beautiful mosaic is very much like drawing love and compassion into the world through working with hospice patients, for instance. And I know
Okay.
you do that as well.
Yeah.
And trying to connect with each individual without expectations and without an agenda, just trying to bring goodness and truth and beauty, these ephemerals and transcendentals, that's the word I was looking for, the transcendentals of the ancients, it's like they understood that. And so renewing that in the 21st century and trying to weave a path that makes a lot of sense. So that work occurs in the writing of the essays. There's a real synergy between the mosaics and writing the essays and doing a little support group sometimes and coaching people one-on-one, which just delights my heart because it's like no giving and taking. It's this constantly circulating, communicating back and forth and sharing of resources. Coaching is so it's really a beautiful thing that I love. And yeah, that goes out into the community in various ways, laying tile in my church as a trustee
Yeah.
or, repairing the steps with concrete. You can find all of that energy in anything that you do.
Mhm.
So that's that practice in life that we have begun to kind of work on, I think. And unified mindfulness has been a wonderful vehicle for encouraging diversity and creativity in that realm.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy to be a part of that.
What I really admire about you, Cynthia, is that you pursue things which are meaningful for you and also contributing, um, to others, and tapping into that beauty and richness that in life.
Well, you do the same. I've seen a lot of that, the nature, the gardening,
Yeah,
working with people who are in difficult circumstances. It is just kind of a natural outflowing, right,
yeah,
of who we are.
yeah. Of what we can contribute um,
Right,
for others. Yeah, yeah. That
right,
connection.
right.
Well, Cynthia, thank you very much for doing this podcast with me. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help and support us, please like and subscribe below.